Liz Johnston and Brice Bolden's officially divorce. This is the story of how Brice Bolden cheated on Elizabeth Johnston and married his secret girlfriend. Today, we are diving deep into a story that has been the subject of intense speculation and heartbreaking rumors. The sudden and unexplained divorce between Elizabeth Johnston and Brice Bolden. For months, the official story was vague. They were simply growing apart and focusing on co-parenting their beautiful daughter, Leighton. But today, we expose the devastating truth. This wasn't a case of growing apart. This was a calculated deception. We have uncovered a shocking story of infidelity, a secret girlfriend, and a hasty Brice Bolden's hidden marriage that took place while Elizabeth was left to pick up the pieces of their broken home. Get comfortable, because this is a long and winding road. We are going to walk you through every step of this story, from the fairy tale beginning to the catastrophic end. To truly understand the depth of this betrayal, we have to go back to the beginning. We were first introduced to Brice Bolden in Season 6 of 7 Little Johnstons. He was charming, respectful, and seemed genuinely smitten with Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, in turn, was head over heels. He even managed to win over the notoriously protective patriarch and matriarch of the Johnston clan, Trent and Amber. They saw him as a responsible young man who truly cared for their daughter. In their eyes, and in the eyes of the viewers, he was the perfect match for Liz. Their relationship blossomed on camera. We saw their first dates, their high school prom, a milestone for any young couple. We saw them navigate the challenges of a long-distance relationship when Brice was away. Their commitment seemed unshakable. They were the show's golden couple, a beacon of stability in a world of reality TV drama. This public journey culminated in 2 major life events that cemented their status as a fixture in the hearts of fans. First, in November 2021, they bought their own home in Johnston-adjacent Forsyth, Georgia. This wasn't just a fling. This was a serious commitment. They were building a foundation for a future together. And then, the biggest news of all. In September 2022, they announced they were expecting their first child. The joy was palpable. The family was ecstatic. The fans were overjoyed. The fairy tale was reaching its zenith. Leighton Drew Bolden was born on November 3, 2022. She was perfect. And Elizabeth and Brice stepped into their new roles as parents seamlessly, or so it seemed. On the surface, they had it all. A beautiful home, a healthy and adorable daughter, a supportive family, and a love that had weathered the storms of youth and the pressures of reality television. Brice was working. Elizabeth was pursuing her passion for nursing. They were the blueprint. This is the image they sold to the world. And it's this image that makes what happened next so utterly unforgivable. The first whispers that something was wrong began to surface in the late summer and early fall of 2023. Dedicated fans, the kind who notice every detail, started pointing out subtle shifts in their dynamic, both on the show and on social media. On Reddit, user JohnstonWatcher88 posted, "Rewatching the latest episode, Brice seems so distant. When Liz is talking about her stressful day at work, he's just on his phone. The vibe is cold." Another user, TLC_fanatic, replied, "I noticed that too." There were no little affectionate touches, no loving glances. It felt more like they were roommates than a couple. These were small things, easily dismissed as the normal stresses of new parenthood and demanding jobs. But then came the social media slowdown. Elizabeth, who had once flooded her Instagram with happy family photos and loving tributes to Brice, suddenly stopped. His last appearance on her main feed was in a family photo from a summer gathering. After that, it was all Leighton, her sisters Anna and Emma, and posts about her nursing career. Brice had vanished from her digital life. Simultaneously, Brice, who was never a prolific poster, went completely silent. His own Instagram, which had featured Elizabeth as his profile picture, was scrubbed. Photos of them together were archived or deleted. It was a digital cleansing, the modern-day sign of a relationship's demise. The official announcement of their split didn't come until a teaser for the new season of 7 Little Johnstons dropped in early 2024. In a tearful confession to her parents, Elizabeth confirmed it was over. But the explanation was frustratingly vague. "We've been living on our own for a while now," she said. The narrative pushed by the family and the show was one of a mutual, amicable separation focused on co-parenting. Amber Johnston stated in a confessional, "The main thing is to co-parent and to continue to do what's best for Leighton." It was a neat, tidy, drama-free explanation. It was also, as we've discovered, a carefully constructed lie designed to protect the family's image and, perhaps, to hide a much uglier truth. For months, we at Reality Rewind have been digging, reaching out to contacts, and trying to understand what really happened. The official story just didn't add up. The speed of the breakup, the social media scrubbing, the intense sadness in Elizabeth's eyes, it all pointed to something more than just growing apart. And then, we got a breakthrough. A source, who has asked to remain anonymous for fear of reprisal, came forward. This source is intimately familiar with the family circle and provided us with a timeline of events that paints a devastating picture of betrayal. For the purpose of this story, we will call our source Sarah. According to Sarah, the problems began long before the public noticed. She alleges that Bryce started to change around the spring of 2023, just a few months after Leighton was born. The pressure of fatherhood, a full-time job, and living under the constant microscope of reality TV began to take its toll. Sarah told us, and I quote, "Bryce felt trapped. He loved Leighton, there's no doubt about that. But he wasn't ready for the life he was living. He felt like he was playing a character, the perfect boyfriend, the perfect dad. He started staying out later, saying he was with friends, but his location would be off. He became secretive with his phone. These were all red flags Liz initially tried to ignore." The situation, our source says, escalated when Bryce began reconnecting with an old acquaintance from his hometown. Let's call this woman Madison. Madison was not in the public eye. She represented a different life for Bryce, a life away from the cameras, away from the Johnstons, a life that was simpler and, in his mind, more normal. According to our source, what started as casual messages and catching up soon blossomed into a full-blown emotional and physical affair. Sarah alleges that Bryce was living a double life. By day, he was the doting father and partner to Elizabeth, filming scenes for the show. By night, and on his days off, he was secretly meeting with Madison. The timeline is sickening. While Elizabeth was at home, likely exhausted from her nursing shifts and caring for their infant daughter, Bryce was allegedly with another woman. He was building a new relationship on the ashes of the one he was still pretending to be in. The house of cards came crashing down in October 2023. The story of the discovery is like something out of a movie, and it is utterly heartbreaking. According to our source, Sarah, Elizabeth discovered the affair through a classic devastating misstep by Bryce. He had come home late one night, claiming he had been working overtime. He placed his phone face down on the kitchen counter and went to take a shower. A moment later, the phone buzzed. Elizabeth, without thinking much of it, glanced over. A message had popped up on the lock screen. The name was Madison, and the message, according to our source, reads something along the lines of, "I miss you already. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." In that single moment, Elizabeth's world imploded. Can you imagine that feeling? The cold dread washing over you. The dawning, horrific realization that the person you trusted, the father of your child, the man you built a home with, has been lying to your face. Sarah described the confrontation that followed as explosive. Elizabeth, armed with the evidence from the phone, confronted Bryce as soon as he got out of the shower. At first, he denied it. He tried to lie, to gaslight her, to claim Madison was just a friend. But Elizabeth held her ground. She had seen the message, the heart emoji, the promise of seeing her tomorrow. The lies crumbled under the weight of the truth. Finally, Bryce confessed. He admitted he had been seeing someone else. He admitted the relationship had been going on for months. According to our source, he tried to justify it, talking about the pressure and his unhappiness. But for Elizabeth, there was no justification. It was the ultimate betrayal. She told him to leave that night. The home they had built together was now a crime scene, and she couldn't stand to have him in it. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Elizabeth's first calls were to her parents and her sisters. The Johnston family, for all their on-screen quirks and disagreements, is a tight-knit unit. An attack on one is an attack on all. Our source Sarah described Trent and Amber's reaction as absolute fury. Trent, in particular, felt personally betrayed. He had welcomed Bryce into his family, treated him like a son, and given him his trust. To learn that Bryce had done this to his daughter, the mother of his grandchild, was infuriating. Sarah tells us, Trent called Bryce the next day. It wasn't a conversation. It was a reckoning. He told Bryce in no uncertain terms that he had disgraced himself and broken their family. Amber was more focused on Elizabeth's well-being, but she was equally disgusted. They made it clear that while they would have to interact with him for Leighton's sake, he was no longer welcome in their family in a personal capacity. This is the drama that was happening behind the scenes while the show was preparing its sanitized growing apart narrative. The reality was a family in crisis, rallying around Elizabeth as she navigated the initial shock and grief. Her sisters, Anna and Emma, became her pillars of support. They were there for the late-night tears, they helped with Leighton, and they reminded her of her own strength. But while Elizabeth was surrounded by her family, Bryce was embedding himself further into his new life. He moved out of the home he shared with Elizabeth and, according to our source, moved in with Madison almost immediately. There was no period of reflection, no time to process the damage he had caused. He simply swapped one life for another. For Elizabeth, this was another knife to the heart. The speed with which he moved on confirmed that their relationship had been over in his mind long before he was caught. She was mourning the end of her family while he was starting a new one. And that brings us to the most shocking and audacious part of this entire saga. If you thought the cheating and the immediate replacement were bad, brace yourselves. Because what Bryce did next is a level of disrespect that is hard to comprehend. For months after the split, Bryce kept a low profile. He was off social media, and his name was only mentioned on the show in the context of co-parenting schedules. It seemed he had faded into the background. But he wasn't just hiding. He was planning. In late April 2024, just 6 months after Elizabeth discovered the affair and kicked him out, Brice Bolden married his secret girlfriend, Madison. We have confirmed through public record searches that a marriage license was issued for Brice Bolden in his home county in April 2024. The ceremony itself, according to our source, was incredibly small and secret. It wasn't announced publicly. It was a quiet affair, attended only by a handful of his own family and close friends. How was it discovered? Through a leak. A guest at the wedding posted a photo to a private, friends-only Instagram story. But in today's world, nothing is truly private. Someone took a screenshot, and it began to circulate in private fan groups before eventually making its way to people who could get it to the Johnston's inner circle. The photo is confirmation of everything. Bryce smiling with his new wife. The man who, less than a year prior, was on television welcoming his daughter with Elizabeth, was now a married man. Married to the woman he cheated on her with. The audacity is staggering. There was no respect for the mother of his child, no consideration for the public and emotional process of their very recent and very painful separation. He didn't even wait a year. This wasn't a man who was grieving a lost relationship. This was a man who was sprinting toward a new one, consequences be damned. The big question in all of this is, why? Why would Bryce throw away his family, his public image, and a relationship that so many people admired? To help us break this down, we're joined by our reality TV analyst, Dr. Klo Evans. Dr. Evans, what is your take on this kind of behavior? Dr. Evans, thank you for having me. From a psychological perspective, what we often see with individuals thrust into the reality TV spotlight especially from a young age, is a phenomenon I call role fatigue. Bryce was cast in the role of the perfect boyfriend. He had to live up to the expectations of Elizabeth, her formidable parents, and millions of viewers. For some, that pressure is invigorating. For others, it's suffocating. It's possible that he never truly individuated. He went from his parents' home to a relationship that was heavily managed and scrutinized by Elizabeth's parents and TV producers. The affair with Madison might have been a desperate, albeit destructive, attempt to reclaim a sense of self.